Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, I'm wonderful. We're certainly not pausing this podcast, so I'm doing great. How about you?
Not so good, Tom,
Mm,
because while we may not be pausing, Ohio State football is pausing all team-related activities due to an uptick in positive COVID tests. And I guess that pandemic is still going on.
big if true, as the kids say. Question: is it time to start cracking each other's heads open and feasting on the goo inside?
If we haven't done it by now, we better start.
Mm,
Time is running out. That
mhm,
vaccination is coming.
mhm.
So
If you're going to panic, this may be your last opportunity to
right.
panic about Ohio State football and COVID. So
Start this
can't
before
waste
the
these
dawn.
opportunities.
No,
Yeah.
exactly. Like if the one thing you do not want to regret is feasting on the goo inside of a human head that you never. I just wish I one regret from the pandemic. Never cracked open a skull and feasted on the goo.
This is one of these times that I'm like, I feel like there's probably a pretty good overlap between our audience and like old school Simpsons viewers, but those who aren't are going, what am I listening to right now?
Yes, thank you for that clarification. That does help because I was going to do the same. Just so people, we are not like brain cannibals. All right, we're just Simpsons idiots. So let's talk about this pausing time. Came out Tuesday morning. I know just the fact that it happens is like, gosh, they still don't have this under control. And I don't know what the limit is, the number of whatever that causes it. It's OSU's call. Because again, even though the Big Ten has their protocols, I don't know that any school has ever reached that number, whatever it is. And so it's always been the individual school's call. So my question, Tom, Ohio State, with this pause, national title hopes over?
Yes,
See, this is what
absolutely.
I was afraid of.
Absolutely. Yes. They may shutter the program. Might have to close the whole school down. City of Columbus may have to change its name to Flavortown and then get shut down. I mean, the implications here could be huge. Yeah, this whole thing reads to me like, well, there's a week before spring practice. There's a little bit. Let's just be real cautious right now because we're not really losing anything by not doing anything the next week. So we'll just shut things down. Because didn't they do this right before the start of fall camp too, where they just
Mhm.
sort of shut everything down and had a week of like, okay, get everything cleared out, and then so you can start fall camp with kind of a clean slate. Yeah, I mean that is exactly what this feels like to me. I'm sure there was an uptick, but this is also if there was a football game this weekend, I have a strong suspicion they would probably be playing said football game.
What if they were playing against Michigan?
Um, well, they would probably show up at least. I
Uh,
mean, I don't know about I haven't looked at Michigan's COVID numbers in a while, but I'm pretty sure Ohio State would show up for that game.
my concern, Tom, is Ohio State never has a week off during the spring. They always practice all the way through spring. They never have like a break
Mm-hmm.
during spring.
During spring,
So
yes, mm-hmm.
so
Yeah.
this week long uh, break during spring could upheave everything they've worked for because we know they just go from winter straight through spring. There's never a break in their time, and so now they have this week of a pause. We'll call it a spring pause. What even is that? And now I'm thinking it's maybe we'll finally get to go to a Jacksonville bowl game this year because of this. Call it a spring pause, if you will.
I'm picturing like the old school MTV, like MTV Spring Pause, Woody Hayes Athletic Center. Like have that whole week where it's like, oh, people are playing volleyball in the grass on the outside. Yeah, it's gonna be great. Yeah,
They've got a sand pit.
they do, and yeah, no, I think we just they can't use any music videos on that channel by law anymore. So now they have to have something else. So I don't know. Do they still do the real world? I don't know. I haven't watched MTV and I was probably about MTV Spring Break age the last time I watched MTV, so it has been a minute. So yes, they do. If you were not picking up the sarcasm in Tony's voice there, they do typically take a week off in the middle of spring practice for spring break. Last year they did 3 practices, left for spring break, and then didn't end up coming back because that was right when everything was sort of blowing up last March. But that is a very typical thing, and that's during spring break. That's not like during spring practice. That's not the pre-spring practice workout to spring practice transition, like this feels like something that a lot of people are getting very worked up over, and I don't know that it's that huge a deal because during a normal year they're interrupting the middle of spring practice. Like there's someone on our board said like they just hope that this doesn't show up in the fall as like, well, we didn't get a normal spring in because it was like that's not what this is. If they this is all reading to me very much like 7 days from now they'll all be back. They'll start spring practice on that Friday as planned. They'll run all the way through. They'll have their spring game on April 17th as planned, and that'll be it. I would be very surprised if, maybe even if they do stop something one more time for a few days or something in the middle, if they have to, I don't think this is anything you're going to be hearing about in September. If they give up 400 passing yards to Oregon, I don't think the first line of conversation is going to be, well, we had this kind of like wonky spring ball. Like if they're getting their 15 spring practices or anything close to their 15 spring practices, like it'll be fine.
Yeah, sure. The coaches would rather them be at the WAC working, but it's 1 week. They'll be back in there, a few days before spring practice starts. Spring practice is still slated to start Friday, March 19th, so that has not changed. No reason to expect it to change, as this is just a 1 week pause. And like I said, that's starting on Tuesday, so 1 week. Get back Tuesday, Tom, thereabouts.
That's how weeks work. Yes.
You get a few days of
although on a show that's called Buckeye Weekly that we produce multiple times every week, we probably do need to explain how weeks work on here.
Well, and that's why I do end the question with the sentence with a question mark. Like every Tuesday, and so then you get a few days to get back into the weight room before practice gets going, and so it does beg the question of whether Ohio State is too stringent, and people on the board were asking, Ohio State's the only team that is pausing activities, I'm sure. And Kentucky had to pause activities for a few days about 9 or 10 days ago. And so it's not just Ohio State, but it does. You certainly don't see a lot of teams pausing activities right now, and you haven't heard much about it. I don't know how serious or stringent the SEC or the Big 12 or the ACC or any other conferences are doing things. I'm not really getting too worked up about how stringent Ohio State is right now or the Big 10 is, because I do expect the vaccines to eventually get here before the season, well before the season. I also, though, Tom, do wonder if once the vaccines get here, like how relaxed will the Big 10 get? And for me, that's the biggest question. It's not, I think spring is going to be fine. It's what happens after everybody is vaccinated who needs to be. How much control does the Big 10 then want to maintain?
Right. And, how many players on each team and coaches and staffers are vaccinated? If everyone's vaccinated, you would think you should be more or less able to go back to normal and not have to have daily testing and all that kind of stuff, just based on the rates that these vaccines are supposedly working at. And as with everything, we will learn more as this all goes along, and they may figure out, hey, this is working better than we thought, or not as well as we thought, or there's a variant that makes these not work as well as we thought before, or whatever. This is all subject to change as always, but it sure seems like the general trend right now is extremely positive, like good, not positive, like how positive has meant bad the last year. Now positive means good in this context. But you're hearing people talk about like everyone who wants a vaccine should be able to have one by July, and then it's like now it's June, and then like you hear some people saying May, and I am a little over a week away from getting my second vaccine shot, and it's like you're starting to see. You're seeing more and more people or talking to more and more people who are starting to get it. And they're starting to, the Johnson & Johnson one is a one-shot deal that just came out. They're starting to produce more of that. Like the general trend has been all very much headed towards this could be a fairly normal summer. And if it's a fairly normal summer, unless something dramatic changes before the fall, it should be a fairly normal fall. Will it be 100,000 people? No one has to wear a mask. Inside the horseshoe this fall, I don't know, maybe. But, at this point, like if it was 75,000 people and they all had to wear a mask, like, you know what, that's fine. I don't care. Like, let's just head in the right direction. Let's keep things headed in the right direction. But I do think there's a pretty reasonable possibility that you'll be able to have at least some fans in the stadium during the spring, at least, probably a decent number in the fall based on the fact that it's outdoors and the research there seems like that's not nearly as much of a concern. I mean, you and I were in a stadium in Miami with, I don't know, 15,000 fans a few months ago before the vaccines even came out. And there was really no significant outbreak traced to that. And so it seems like this is all trending in a very good direction. So my expectation is that it should all be, normal-ish. Like if your 2018 self looked at it, it might be like, what's going on there? But if your 2020 self looked at it, it'd be like, wow, things are back to normal almost. Like that feels like that's about where we're going to be.
Yeah, boy, to look back and imagine where we would be now, and like if we could just get 15,000 people in there, that would be amazing. I did have people on Twitter, I tweet out the pause thing, and they're like, didn't the Big Ten learn anything from last year that they don't need to be so stringent and they don't need to be so regimented and rigid? And I don't know that the Big Ten looks back on last year and thinks that they would have changed anything, because one, like, as far as I know, they got through it healthy. They played a season, they had a team in the national championship game. So I don't know that the Big Ten would be like, you know what, we probably shouldn't have done this or this. Sure, maybe we should have played, with the original schedule, but we got our daily testing from holding out. It's like it was some sort of, Dak Prescott holding out, waiting for the Cowboys. We're not going to play until the government gives us daily testing or whatever. Do you think the Big Ten looks back at last year and like if they did it over again, is there anything significant they would change? Because, like I said, they seem to be relatively healthy, as far as healthy as you could be coming out of a season. You made the title game. Players were kept tested, and you've got all of this information. Is there anything they regret? Would they change?
So your question is based on what I know of humanity in the present day. Will people be willing to admit that they are wrong based on new evidence? Let me shake my magic 8-ball. Signs point to no. My suspicion is that it will. It's like, well, based on what we knew then, that was the right thing to do, and it was, no one's ever wrong. No one ever changes their mind. This is just kind of how things are now, and that's how it is. I think it is pretty easy to look back at it and go, yeah, there was a bunch of stuff that they did that was probably exactly the wrong thing to do at that time, like getting off of that original schedule. And, you can come up with rationalizations for it, but you look at how things went everywhere else in the country, and it was like, yeah, September, October, everything was pretty much okay, most places, and you didn't have big spikes in numbers. And, I think a lot of things have gone a lot better than people expected. I think, kids being back in school and kids being back on campus has all gone better than I think a lot of people were expecting last fall. And, that's great. That's wonderful. And so that means that was the right decision, I guess, to bring the kids back on campus. Now, if you could bring the kids back on campus and that was safe, like based on what we know about on-field transmission, there's functionally none, is from most of the studies that I've seen, at least. So, yes, you probably could have played last summer or last September or October, had most of your season in, had more time in to, reorganize events. Like, yes, that very clearly would have been the right decision. Would they say, yes, we did the wrong, we definitely did the wrong thing and should have kept it that way? No, I think they would point to, yeah, well, I mean, it worked out okay because we got through the season and everyone was relatively healthy. So therefore, it must have been the right decision.
And that's why I keep going back to, I hope they're ready to start making the more difficult decision of, okay, now let's start doing stuff, rather than the easier decision of, yeah, we better not yet. And, whether that's spring game attendance or whatever, just attendance, like any attendance. Let's, if Ohio is letting 30% in, then let the Big Ten allow Ohio to do what Ohio wants to do. Let the Big Ten allow Minnesota what they want to do and whatever. And just, I guess, relax the, if one program can't do it, no programs can do it. And then also for the respective parties and leadership at those universities to begin to okay, let's go with the current state guidelines of 30%, and we're seeing it at the Big Ten tournament. Like 8,000 fans, 8,000 people in attendance are allowed. So, you know, Ohio State has had friends and family for basketball games, which may total a couple of hundred, and really now that they're saying, well, if 8,000 in a football stadium, I mean, let's remember it's probably 65,000, 70,000. I'm not exactly sure what Lucas Oil Stadium holds, but uh, start to matriculate to attendance and just like progressing. That's what I'm asking for, and I think we will. I just wonder, like, does it take like full vaccinations rather than? And I don't want to go way off, but like the original idea was to keep the hospitals from being overwhelmed and that whole medical industry from being overwhelmed. Well, I don't think we're gonna do that at this point regarding athletics. So, do you need to be so rigid when it comes to testing for 19-year-olds? Tom.
Yep. I mean, probably not. I think that at this point, a lot of this is being run based on liability and not on, concern about actual medical impact on these individual players. And, that's just kind of how a lot of the world is run right now. And that's just sort of the reality of things. But I mean, to your point about just sort of the general trend lines, like, yeah, I mean, my parents live in Connecticut, and Connecticut has been way more to the careful, keep everything closed down side of things than Ohio has, for example. Connecticut's governor recently started opening things up. It did not get nearly the press that the Texas announcement got, but they did probably 70% of what Texas did. They're still wearing masks, but a lot of their stuff is opening up to, indoor dining and most of capacity in places. And he told, summer festivals, like, I'm not saying you can do it, but I'm saying you can start planning for it because it seems like it's sure to shake. And, so if Connecticut is doing that, then it seems like probably just about everywhere is probably going to be trending in that direction relatively soon. And this is probably all predicated on vaccination rates continuing to grow and all that kind of stuff. But, everything is trending in that direction right now. So I think, unless something significant changes, I think that is a reasonable expectation that may be what we see, whether it's this summer or, this fall.
The state motto of Connecticut is "Don't mess with Connecticut."
I don't believe that's true. Actually, it's Latin on the flag. I don't remember. I don't
no
remember
mess. No mal. Out Connecticut.
I think there's grapes on the Connecticut state flag. I think it's something about being transplanted and sustaining. If I remember my Connecticut history classes from high school, which was actually way back in history when I was actually taking those. So I might be wrong. I didn't exactly go to high school with Daniel Webster, but it was close. Yeah.
I believe it's like, don't mess with Connecticut lest we stop you like grapes into wine. Something like that. Because, of course, being Connecticut, there has to be a little bit of the wine stuff because, it's a frou-frou state.
And then Randy Edsel gets a $1,200 bonus because you just translated the Connecticut state flag on the podcast. That's how this works.
Good old UConn. So, Tom, speaking of, there was no good transition from Connecticut.
Speaking of football coaches.
Yes. So I just wanted to touch on this Rush Probst thing. And I'm sure most of the people out there know what I'm talking about. Rush Probst was, he's a high school coach, Valdosta coach currently, but in Georgia, and was recorded talking to, I guess, a booster about how, how Georgia gets all of their recruits and it's through payments, and how Alabama gets the recruits through payments. And, Georgia is now investigating, which is
Sergeant Schultz from the University of Georgia Police Department is on the case. Yeah. Go on.
We don't see football anywhere. And so they'll be looking into that, and I'm sure they'll find something. And you have people saying, well, he's a shady guy, and there are plenty of accusations about this guy as well, and he's currently under investigation for like paying recruits or something like that. And so people are like, well, how can you believe this guy? And to me, it's like when you go to the mafia and if you can arrest a hitman, he can tell you where everybody is buried because he's put them there. He's been around it. And it's like, well, how can you believe a mafia hitman? It's like, well, yeah, but if you're going to believe anybody, this, if this guy's telling you something, you might want to listen. And being, being recorded surreptitiously is always kind of shady, but maybe that's when the guy's at his most honest. I don't know. But given that, one, nobody is surprised by this. And yet you have other people saying, "Oh, you can't believe him." There is nobody like you would think if this was Ohio State Tom. The next day, maybe that night, you would have ESPN or The Athletic or whatever in Columbus trying to dig up. They've got names. Rush Probst is giving names of these boosters and the payment guys, and he's just laying it all out there. I remember back in the Tressel years when ESPN would have producers in town for like a month looking for stuff. If you just call up Rush Probst, you might, if you're interested in doing this kind of thing anymore, of investigating and tearing down a program, there's a lot there. And then the very next day, I see a story in the Ringer from one of the famous college football writers who everybody loves, just giving this lovingly homage to Nick Saban and how great he is and just what he does and how much he loves his players and how well he does all of this development and still wants to win. And it's so not what I'm used to being at Ohio State.
Yeah, it's the level of interest here is not commensurate with past indication, instances somewhere along these lines. Let's start with that. There are all sorts of reasons probably behind that. One is that I think in general at this point people just kind of don't care. Like I feel like if the Tatgate thing happened right now, the general reaction nationally outside of maybe small pockets of rival fan bases would kind of be just a collective shrug. So, that was in that way, that was a very poorly timed scandal because that happened like what, 6 months, 8 months before the Sandusky thing came out. And then it was like, oh, okay, that's what an actual scandal looks like. Okay. And, that was like front cover of Sports Illustrated back when Sports Illustrated was a thing. Like it was like, whoa, this is, George Dorman's big, how deep it went and rigging raffles and all that nonsense. Like, and then you fast forward just a few years and you get to like SI did a big series of stories on Oklahoma State, like 6 years after that, 5 years after that, something like that. And it was all sorts of stuff about how, boosters, coaches handing out envelopes of cash and all that kind of stuff. And everyone just kind of went, like it was just, everyone was kind of done with it. That was just, Todd Gurley was signing autographs for money. And by that point, by the time that happened, everyone had just kind of gone like, I mean, the person who really got burned on that was the guy who was trying to set him up. Like that was the person who kind of got blown up by that more than Todd Gurley. Like, I think everyone has kind of realized like, yes, these are student athletes that have a value. And, there are bigger issues to worry about than whether these people are being paid money and how much money. Now, I think the scope of the money that's being discussed here, and if you want to take Rush Probst at his word or not, like that's fine. But the scope of the money being discussed here is orders of magnitude larger than what you probably would find at most schools around the country. But, I think there's probably a lot of stuff like this that happens in a lot of places. So, and I mean, you can count me on the, like, I don't care. And I think my big takeaway from this is, if the big argument against name, image, and likeness is, oh, but how will the money change? Okay, well, good news. Recruiting has already been changed. So we didn't cross that off your list of potential objections. Now let's just do name, image, and likeness. Let the players profit off their name, image, and likeness. It'll make everyone's life better. It will help a lot of families who are probably a lot closer to the poverty line than, the coaching staffs and all of those folks. Like, that's fine. Let's do that. If someone wants to give a college football player money for being good at college football, last time I looked, this was America. This was like a free market. I mean, right? I mean, while I was learning my Connecticut history, I learned something about it in economics or the free market or something. Like it seems like that might be a fairly American thing to do. Just kind of like, yeah, That's fine. If you would like to play a football player with some money for being good at football, I don't care.
I agree with a lot of that. What I disagree, or don't not even disagree with, but what I would say is, I still think if this is Justin Fields being accused of accepting $180,000, there would be people in Columbus like investigating it.
Well,
Writers.
yes. Well, that's a whole separate conversation. Yes, and you know the thing that they put up with the ESPN logo and the SEC logo, and it's the SEC network. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so that was a non sequitur. Back to you, Tony.
And that's really the one of the annoying things is, you still go back to the Urban Meyer Zach Smith thing, which 2018, and there were people coming from everywhere to write about it and investigate it and talk about it, and you've got names being named here, and I'm still granted it's just been a couple of days, maybe something will come out of this time, but nobody expects it.
Ron Howard, narrator voice. Nothing will come out of this.
Nothing will come out of this.
Nothing will come out of this. This is. I mean, look at Bill Self. All the stuff that's come out about Bill Self. Isn't Will Wade still coaching LSU? I mean, Sean Miller's going to get fired for losing, not for paying players at Arizona. Like, I mean, it's like this and that. Those are like FBI wiretaps. So now you want the NCAA to investigate this and do it in. They don't have subpoena power. Like, what they're going to flip Rush Probst? Like, okay, I mean, cool, good, have fun. Yeah, I don't want to spoil the ending of the movie for anyone, but nothing's going to happen. So don't get yourself all worked up over how this is going to be the end of Georgia football. The good news is Georgia football hasn't really existed since 1980, so it's fine. So it's not really, you can't end something that didn't exist.
There you go. Although Clemson somehow they came back from 1980 and became a thing.
Mm-hmm. That was 1981. That's different, totally different.
That's a completely separate decade. The name, image, and likeness thing with the ruining college football reminded me. I was just happened upon the ESPN, like the 150 years of college football series that they did this summer, and it was about when the television contracts were they were going to start showing more than 3 games per team, or like all of these contracts were going crazy. And you had Michigan's president, and this would have been like 1980 or something, talking about how 82 or 85, how this is gonna kill college football, because like, we bring in at Michigan from ticket sales $800,000 a year every year. You think television's gonna give us that much money? It's gonna kill college football. And it's just there's a long list of things that were gonna kill college football, and that was one of them. And first name, image, and likeness, paying players. There's expansion. All of the not redshirting freshmen. That's going to kill college football. And somehow, Tom, college football just keeps keeping on. It's amazing.
Yeah, and this is, I mean, there's a great baseball podcast called Effectively Wild, where they will talk about, there's sort of this running trope that baseball is dying and no one cares about baseball anymore. And it's like, they go back to they went back in newspaper archives to like 1890, and it's like, baseball is dying. And it's just like, this is just like a thing. It's just, sometimes things change. They do not always stay the same. Sometimes they get better. Sometimes they get worse. I guess I should reiterate, sometimes things do get better. That's the 2021 lesson, I think. You know the other half of that. You've had that beaten into your head the last year. But yeah, sometimes things do get better. I mean, this is probably going to be bad news for a certain select class of people at the head of the sport. And I'm not talking about programs. I'm talking about, people who probably make a decent amount of money off of the game, who, probably are profiting off of these players to a certain degree. It's probably not great for them in some ways, but the sport will go on. It will be fine. Long term, I think there's an argument to be made that this might actually open it up to be a better sport, because then if you can make some money at the college level and you can provide for your family to some degree at a college level, where, even if you're not making $60,000 times 3 for coming back for a year, as someone was in that on that wiretap, there are lots of families that have kids who might be first generation college kids who $5,000 would make an awful big difference in their lives. So, hey, what if we allowed them to exchange their skills for money? That seems something that might be something that would be okay to do and might benefit some people for whom the marginal utility of $5,000 might be more significant than for someone who is, installing their third hot tub in their house or whatever. This seems like this might actually be a good thing for a bunch of people. But then again, what do I know?
You're suggesting giving money to people for a service provided?
Mm-hmm. Money can be exchanged for goods and services. Yes, this is one of these economic lessons I also learned from The Simpsons. Yes.
Why can't he, like any good American with their child, just get into the grease business?
Smart. That's smart, and that is certainly a good fallback plan if you don't end up having a Division I athlete. But if this is the same argument that people make in terms of like paying minor league players a reasonable wage as opposed to like $6,000 a year, and then saying, all right, and good luck in the off season. Like, if you make it so that more people can do it as a living, you don't have people who have to drop out for financial reasons as early, and you probably have a higher level of skill available to you as a sport on the whole. And when you have a higher level of skill available to you on the whole, like watching an Ohio State Clemson game is more entertaining than watching a Utah State San Jose State game, because the players are better, they're faster, they do crazy good things. If you have the higher level of talent all across the sport, because more people can do it and more people can stick with it and don't need to drop out of sports, and it's a viable path to at least some money for them in the short term, like, great. That seems like something that would benefit us all.
The interesting thing is it's not going to keep Justin Fields around longer, but it may keep Jalen Marshall, a Noah Brown, a Mike Weber, somebody who maybe they feel like, well, I have to go. Well, maybe if they've been compensated for a couple of years and the reasons that they have to go are mitigated because people are being taken care of back home. And so maybe it's not the first rounders, but it's the undrafted free agents that come back another year and become third rounders. Mm-hmm. And, aside from, it's also beneficial to the people, like the human beings. There's also maybe a good football thing that could come from this if people are just wanting to look at the football aspect of it. So there could be good for both people, not just the evil football students.
Yeah, nothing worse than people who like to play football. I can't stand them, and I won't watch them. I will not watch them if they want to play football. Yeah, it's just one of those things that's like, the answer to why do you do it this way is because we've always done it this way. It's like, well, okay, do you have another reason, or is just inertia your reason? Because it seems like inertia is just your reason, and if inertia is your reason, that's generally a pretty terrible reason to do anything. Like, well, we've always done it that way. No, what else you got, friend? Because the purity of amateurism trope has pretty much run its course, I think. So, okay, now what else you got? And if the answer is nothing, then that's great. All right, and now we're doing name, image, and likeness.
Well, and that takes me right back to the football and the pandemic. This is what we've always done, so this is how we're going to do it. It's like, well, maybe you can do more. But Tom, let's talk quickly about basketball.
In a pandemic?
In a pandemic. Getting ready for a conference tournament. A year ago, the Big Ten Conference Tournament had maybe one game played when everything got shut down, or
Yeah, there was that game the night that the world was blowing up. That it was like Rudy Gobert and Tom Hanks and all of that, and it was like this 45-minute span where it was like, oh no, everything is terrible is happening everywhere, and Tom Hanks, like, please protect Tom Hanks. That was all happening in this like crazy 45-minute span, and right during that span, Nebraska was playing that night. I think they might have had two games that first, Wednesday night. Nebraska was playing that night, and Fred Hoiberg was on the bench and just looked absolutely terrible. And it was like, just looked like he wanted to die. And at this point, no one knew anything about any of this. And it's like, is he going to die on the bench? What is going on? Who let him come out there? And I think it turned out he just had the flu, but who thought that was a good idea? So that was my takeaway from the 2019 Big Ten tournament, or 2020 Big Ten tournament. Who thought that was a good idea? And then they canceled it right before tip off at noon the next day. I was watching TV and it's like, all right, the Big Ten tournament is coming up next, and it's canceled.
Because there are players on the court warming up.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah.
So, but hopefully everything is scheduled to go off without a hitch beginning Wednesday. Ohio State will take on the winner of Minnesota and Northwestern in game 2 on Thursday, roughly around 2 p.m. I would expect them to beat either of those teams, even though I know that hasn't always happened this season.
They have lost to both of those teams this season somehow.
So, but and the one at Minnesota was just one of the worst games Ohio State has played. But I don't feel like they've been terrible in this 4-game stretch, because they were terrible in one game, but they were in all of the others against very good teams. They just, died a little at the end and couldn't quite come through. And I think that's good enough to beat Minnesota and Northwestern. I also think that would be good enough to beat Purdue on Friday, even though, Tom, again, beating Purdue is not something that Ohio State has done very well this season. In fact, I would say they've been terrible at it.
Mm-hmm. Yes. If you gave them 2 attempts to do it, they would be unsuccessful thus far this season. Yes. Yeah. I mean, this is like, they should beat Minnesota or Northwestern, whoever that is. I think I'm expecting it to be Minnesota, because Northwestern basically beat Ohio State and then just like immediately lost a billion games in a row. So I would expect it to probably be Minnesota, although Minnesota may be in the coaching market pretty soon, it sounds like. So, yeah, those are 2 teams who are kind of a mess who, Ohio State, things are not super fantastic for Ohio State. I made a joke on Twitter about the fact that if you're looking for reason for optimism about Ohio State basketball, good news is spring football starts pretty soon. And Ohio State football or basketball fans were not in the mood for a joke on Saturday night, friends. Allow me to assure you, the egg avatars with 15 followers were out in force to tell me, sir, I am unamused by your chicanery. So
yeah, I saw one from Jerry Lucas 69 who was not happy with you.
These things happen. That Jerry Lucas is a nice man. So we have, I think, a little bit of perspective that needs to be gained here, where yes, it's a 4-game losing streak. However, 4 games ago, what started that losing streak was maybe one of the most entertaining games I've watched in college basketball in years, and Ohio State going toe-to-toe with one of the very best teams in the country, put in at 93-87 or something. It's like, if they play like that, they can beat literally anyone in the country. They don't always play like that. They have had a couple games in a row where the shots were not falling in a way that I was not expecting them to have those issues. Like they have enough guys that can score that it's like, well, if 3 of the 6 guys who can score are scoring, like they'll be fine. And they have just had a couple games where it's just like, oh, no one can score. Okay, cool. Well, that's a problem if you can't play defense. So, I think you just kind of have to assume that at some point those shots are going to start falling again. And this team is better than Minnesota Northwestern. Probably should beat Purdue, probably. And then, you see where you go from there. But if they win a couple of games, if they win 2 games, I think they're very comfortably a 2 seed in the NCAAs. If you win 1, you're probably still a 2 seed anyway. And, I think for the most part, you win that first game. And then after that, you might just be playing for, like, are you the 2 seed in Illinois' region, or are you the 2 seed in Gonzaga's region? Because one of those things you would far prefer, and it is not to be in Gonzaga's region. So, you don't have the travel considerations this year because they're doing everything in Indiana. So it's not like, oh, you don't want to get shipped out to Spokane. Like, no, it's just you're really just kind of looking at, okay, if you're the 2, who's the 1, who's the 3, and the higher seed you are as a 2, the worse 1 and the worse 3 you're going to get. So that's probably more or less what the stakes are here, because I can't fathom a way they could possibly get back to a 1 seed, because then committee never looks at the Big Ten championship game because it's too late.
The NCAA has suggested the Big Ten teams, that to just stay in Indianapolis that are going to make that, like the 9 teams that are expected to make the NCAA tournament, just stay in Indianapolis. Holtman said, well, we're still considering that. Like, if we lose on Thursday, we're probably going to come home and then just head back out.
Question: how would 7 straight days of St. Elmo's cocktail sauce impact the team heading into the NCAA tournament? Feels like not great. I'm not a medical professional. I probably should have given that disclaimer earlier in the show as we were talking about a pandemic, but especially now with regard to cocktail sauce, I'm not a medical professional.
So speaking of St. Elmo's, that'll wrap it up on our basketball talk. I had an invite to go to for Thursday night after the game for St. Elmo's. I'm like, all right, well, let me just look up the prices. And just to sauce a steak is like $5. And so it's, I'm looking like, even like I can afford to go to St. Elmo's. All right, I have like $200 in my wallet right now at this moment. I could eat there.
I thought for sure you were going to say bank account. Wallet. Good
No,
for you.
no,
For
no.
you.
Yeah, no. I roll heavy. But I cannot justify like a $65 steak. I can't do it.
What? So if it's $5 to sauce a steak, I would pull the waiter aside and say, "Excuse me, pony. How much to ketchup a steak?"
Well, we can go to the store and get you a bottle for $2.99.
Mm-hmm. There you go. Smart. Gotta do it.
But I can't. I just personally can't. And then the sides or whatever, it's a $15 baked potato or what have you. I can't. I will not. I can't allow myself to do this. I guess it's because I grew up during the Depression, which I call the '80s. It's my personal depression of the 1980s. But I'm sure it's all good. I don't know that any piece of food is worth $60.
So what you got to do is you got to ask Kirk where to eat, and then see, because Kirk has thoughts on where to eat, and then if you write something about it, maybe Kirk will let you expense it. Just saying, think about it.
I didn't think about it.
Your rookie mistake.
Yeah. All right. Well, let me think about it. Well, I'm doing that. I think, Tom, that'll do it. Do you have anything else?
I'm just going to plug tomorrow morning's morning scoop already, since we got that. Tony's so mad he's not on. Tony will be on Friday to talk about the Ohio State game, but I guess I should specify the Ohio State basketball game. So we'll have Tony.
Football is paused.
Yes, football is paused. Tony will be on Friday to talk about the Ohio State basketball game. But before then, tomorrow morning, Wednesday morning, I have on Matt Brown from the Extra Points newsletter. He is going to be talking about the story that came out in the Washington Post last Friday on the Freedom of Information Act requests that went to the Big Ten, where Big Ten presidents were openly conspiring in emails subject to the Freedom of Information Act requests, actively conspiring to hide information from the Freedom of Information Act. It was one of the most cartoonishly buffoonish acts of stupidity from people who are not actual morons. Like, these are actually intelligent people doing some of literally the dumbest crime you could possibly do. And it was all surrounding last year's summertime Big Ten, like, who's, are we going to let the kids come back on campus for this fall? Are we going to play football this fall? And, hey, there wasn't a lot of information that came out about how that process went down. Why was that? Well, it turns out the Big Ten presidents, several of them, were actively conspiring to hide that information from you and documents that should be subject to the Freedom of Information Act under the law. So this is one of these shows that you're just going to have to trust me. Like, I'm sure this is not as exciting as the one I did on Tuesday, which is like, hey, the future of Ohio State quarterback recruiting. Like, that had Mark Givler on, talked about Quinn Ewers and how things are going to go with the quarterback commitments, and will there be this crazy musical chairs with recruiting quarterbacks for 2022 once visits open up, and like, what the heck is going on with 2023 quarterbacks because no one's committed. So that's that's kind of the fun, exciting football-y one. The one for Wednesday with Matt Brown is maybe the one that matters more, because there are some pretty important pieces there that are like, you're a public servant, so you're supposed to be following the law and being accountable. So why are you not doing that? And why are you actively conspiring to do, literally, as Matt calls it, literally Kyle Flood dumb level crimes? Because Kyle Flood did the same thing. Kyle Flood, legendary former Rutgers coach, who sent an email, and in the email said, I'm sending this from my personal account so that it's not subject to the Freedom of Information Act, and then requested a teacher to change a grade for a player. That's how dumb we're talking about here. So that's I think you guys will, if you give it a shot, I think you guys will actually learn a lot and really end up enjoying that. And also, Matt's from Granville, so we talked a little Granville, Ohio as well, the loveliest village in all the land.
But if you write in the email, this is not subject to FOIA. I declare bankruptcy. Is that
the president of Michigan, who is Mark Schlissel, who is a doctor, literally an epidemiologist, probably one of the smartest men in the state of Michigan, wrote in an email, and I'm just going to paraphrase it here. It was basically, he wrote to the Chancellor of Wisconsin, whose name was Rebecca Black, but it was, no, Rebecca Black was the Friday girl. So it must have been Rebecca Blank. uh, basically, so if I just delete the emails, would they then be subject to FOIA? And it's like, yes, in fact, they are. Yes. And thank you for putting your evidence of intent to, instruct a FOIA inquiry in print in a place where it's subject to a FOIA inquiry. Bravo.
Now, my understanding is to avoid this in the future, they are only emailing in Pig Latin.
Apparently, there is a whole Big Ten secret platform where they can communicate that the Big Ten is not a public, the Big Ten is a private organization. Like Northwestern is not subject to FOIA.
Big Ten Chan.
Yeah.
Big Chan.
Can't top that. I think we're done here.
All right. Good. I'm glad that we're done. I'll be heading out to Indianapolis Thursday morning for some basketball, so I'm looking forward to that. Tom, I guess that'll do it then. So we want to thank you all for listening. Remember, check out BuckeyeScoop.com. As Tom said, there's a bunch of stuff on there. As always, the Ask the Insiders board is hopping right now due to a pause. So it's busy because of a pause, but it's also busy because of other things going on. So check that out. If you're not yet a member, please become one and see what we're always talking about. So thank you all for listening and watching, and we will talk to you guys on Thursday.